Because I love him.
Good reason.
And Bill, I don't know all of his history of engineering and all the junk he's been into. He used to talk with Ron Goodman about that stuff, because Ron knew about that shit. and I don't. You know, I've had math, but I never tried to educate myself so that I could be useful in the industrial, productive world of engineering. But Bill, what Bill is an explorer. He goes out in the places. That was where this introduction, the opening circle came from for me. He goes out into places beyond our sense of limitation and plays around out there and discovers for himself that what he previously thought of as limitation, or what the people around himself think of as limitation, is not real. Whether you are talking about spiritual dimensions, whether you are talking about things like ESP, you know, whether you are talking about possibilities in engineering, whether you're talking about whether or not we have to live utterly dependent on Exxon for our livelihood. Whether you were talking about whether or not my love can transform a disease, you know. He goes out and he experiences stuff, and he tries stuff, and he reads, and he learns, and then he comes back and tries to share it with people who have no idea what the hell he's talking about. So that's what he's going to do today.
That's my challenge.
Yeah.
And when he said, say I don't know, I have to start with saying, I don't know.
So let your limits go.
Yeah. Okay.
And let you, whenever you're around Bill, you always have to benefit from Bill's presence, you have to let go of what you think you know. And let go of your sense of limitation, and just nod your head and take it in. And when you have questions, he may or may not answer them, and he knows that you don't let the group run away with you with questions.
Questions are okay, though.
There we go.
Don't hesitate if you have a question.
Bill was a part of this group for many years. He lived very close to here in Willow Glen. And he was here, and he did a lot of work with the Dowsers group, and came to the, had booths at the Holistic Arts Fairs, and then moved to Berkeley, and then moved to Napa, so now it's a bit of a drive.
Yeah, even lived in Mountain View in between them.
But apparently he drives fast because he thinks he can get to Napa in 2 hours today. Welcome, Bill Mundy.
Is it okay if I sit or should I stand? I'll do either.
Whatever you're comfortable with.
I wanted to just say a few quick things about what I heard today. Viewing and connecting with the universal aspects, right? The galaxy and the universe is part of you. I have used that metaphor or identity to do amazing healing work in the past. So not only can you explore aspects of yourself, but you can enable change in this body, your body, by working with what you see as disturbed or distorted in that space and watching it change and handing that to change. So you're on the threshold of an amazing journey when you do that, so keep it up.
That was for me too.
And Raina said she launched my career. She actually did launch my speaking career because I got a call from the guy with the invisible wife, and Tom. What's his name?
Oh no, Dr. Dean.
Dr. Dean.
Yeah.
He said, Bill, we don't have a speaker tomorrow. Can you come? And I go, what should I talk about? He says, just tell us about you. Because you're entertaining, I guess, but whatever. My life is. And that's how I got started. I came in and just told stories about things that I had experienced, and it's been going up since then. So with that, I wanted to address I think it was you mentioned that we have this access to knowledge, or somebody in the spiritual awakening, how that expanded consciousness can bring information into us. Mm-hmm. That is, I want to say definitively from all the research I've been doing, the exact space that all the inventors in the world have ever gotten their inspirations from. Mm-hmm. They call it religious, enlightenment, visited by angels. They call it contemplation. They call it reductive reasoning. They've got all kinds of names for it. But it is the source of where their inspiration comes from, and it's something that we can all access. So I'm here to talk about technical stuff. There will be no math, so you can relax. Tom. Don't feel inadequate, because all of us have the capability of learning and understanding and exploring and even contributing to this space without technical background. And that leads me to want to mention a couple of people that have done that. Okay, one is a guy named Paul Pantone, who was a Mormon. He may not be any longer because the whole group didn't support him. But he is an extremely spiritual man and an incredible alternative healer. He's available on the phone. You can look him up and call him and talk to him about it, although he would rather talk about the struggles he's had trying to get his technology into the world, which is unfortunate because most of these inventors end up falling into that niche where they're fighting a battle they can't win, and their technology as a result doesn't go anywhere. So I wanted to really open up to you and ask you to consider for a moment how much energy, meaning power and gas and electricity, influences your life. Because, and I know some of you are my age or thereabouts, and you realize that the price of gas is more than 10 times what it was when we were younger. Yeah. More than 10. More than 10.
I remember 29 cents. Yeah.
There you go. There you go.
I thought 49 was full.
And when shopping gas stations for a penny made a difference.
Yeah.
Now, 50 cents, it's like...
Yeah, it goes up in a day, 50 cents.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So you don't even know if you're going to be able to buy the same amount of gas tomorrow on the same amount of money. But as a kid, when I first got a car and money was tight, we went out and realized we were low on gas, spent $1, and had a great time driving all over town on that $1. Those were the days, right? So what I came to realize is that the power, or the cost of power, is really what is being used to control the economy today. It's no longer, as I also have a business degree, not just a double E, but when I was in school, they talked about how they control the economy with interest rates, and they watch the inflation, and all of that went out the window when the organizations of the world, headed up by Kissinger of all people, inspired the Arabs to unite as one collective bargaining front and start controlling the price of oil worldwide as opposed to competing with each other. And when that happened, in the late 60s, early 70s, the whole world changed. And there were a few people inspired by that. Okay, one was Paul Pantone, and he invented a carburetor system that can run an engine on water and fuel. Okay, he demonstrates it with water and fuel. But there is a recording of his that I listened to in which he states, "It was a glorious day when my engine actually ran on root beer." So it doesn't really matter what that fuel is, as long as water's in the mix, it will turn it into energy.
Wow.
And I thought about, I've had a hard time preparing for this, because not in what I'm going to talk about, because I'm just going to go on, but about how to get the point across. And I have a video of one of his pitchmen, a guy named Dennis Lee, who is a slick salesman. I mean, he looks and dresses and acts like a used car salesman. And 60 Minutes went after him because he at one time was promoting some hydrogen converters for cars that didn't deliver what they said they were going to do, and they were coming after him like he's a technical genius, and didn't stand behind his product. And he's just a pitchman, But he does a demonstration, and I have it on video, and I'm not going to show it, I'm just going to tell you about it. You can look him up on the internet, in which he starts a lawnmower in a room, which, if any of you know gas lawnmowers, You will last less than 3 minutes in a room that's running a gas-powered engine because of the pollution it puts out, right? So he starts this engine and runs it without any problems. Nobody's complaining. And I have to say, I'm going to throw this in real quick. This was demonstrated in a room with test equipment to judge the quality of the air coming out of the motor. And it turned out it was in San Jose. It was cleaner than the air people were breathing.
Wow.
Okay? Dennis takes it one further. He shuts off the exhaust. He removes the tailpipe from that engine and it keeps running. So, you know, he goes on and on, hey, nobody can do this, you know, this is impossible, blah, blah. But he's missing the point. That's removing the carbon footprint from a motor. So no pollution. And in fact, because this engine will burn anything with water, even vaporized aluminum, you can eliminate all toxic substances while you motor around the world, not polluting. Okay, that's the technology of Paul Pantone, which incidentally came to him from inspiration because he's a Mormon. I'm not Mormon, and I hate dogma, so I don't know the exact quote, but there is an emphasis about the iron rod of God or whoever. He put an iron rod in his carburetor, and that's what enables this magic to happen. So inspired by religion, not a technical guy, couldn't explain it, presents it to the world and says, look, this thing eliminates pollution. Was on, you know, what he saw as the golden path of money, right? Because this is what the world needed, even back in '68 when he invented it. Okay, people were looking at horses dying from lead pollution, right? So they knew it was bad, and that got him thrown in a mental institution by the governor of Utah. For 3 years, he had his teeth drilled out, and they tortured him, trying to force him to sign over the rights of his design to the governor of Utah, which he refused to do. They infected him with 3 lethal diseases, and then discharged him because they didn't want to bear the expense of caring for him in his final days. He fooled them all because, like I said, he is really quite conscious. He healed himself with some herbal remedies and moved on, which has been from state to state. He can no longer come to California because he will be arrested on site, because California is an oil-producing state. And he also is aware that there are a number of laws on the books which are not public, which is illegal in this country, but he said, no, you will be arrested if you put my device on your car and you make that publicly. No, because you will, he claims there's a law against improving your efficiency of your car by more than 50%, which to me makes no sense whatsoever, but he says, hey, he knows people that have been, you know, arrested, prosecuted, harassed. Even the IRS has come after truckers who convert their cars to water burning because they're not paying enough road taxes. So they get them for tax evasion, even though the taxes are only collected through purchase of fuel.
But how do they know that they've done this to their engines?
Their records no longer reflect the huge gas bills
Yeah,
that
not
they
a
used
big
to.
gas bill.
Oh.
Really? So they're watching.
Really.
It's all about the friggin' money.
They do an audit through the IRS.
How do you spell his last name?
Pantone, P-A-N-T-O-N-E.
Oh.
P-I-N?
P-A-N, Pantone.
Pantone colors.
But his reactor is called a GEET, G-E-E-T. And I believe his website is geetinternational.com or org, I'm not sure which. But there are literally hundreds of videos of people demonstrating his device, that it works and it's effective. So there's no question that the technology is real.
Are there other countries trying to use this technology?
He has been trying to sell it to other countries, but I can tell you there was a farmer in the Philippines named Denny Dingle.
Denny Dingle.
Denny Dingle. He was arrested in 2012 at the age of 82 for fraud. Okay? Now, for over 20 years, he's been driving a car around Manila on water. Okay? He pours it into a little box about the size of, in fact, it is a converted battery case, right? He demonstrates this by unplugging it and watching the engine die, plugging it back in and having it run. It's easy to verify. You smell the exhaust. If it smells like petrol, it's got petrol in it. He runs it on pure water. He actually drove the president of the Philippines, Aquino, the guy before Melda, who had all the shoes. And,
That's how I know.
that's how I know it, right?
Benito Aquino.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, unfortunately, politics I really don't
His
relate to
wife
that
was
either.
president also.
But and the president was like, "Wow, this is great," because the Philippines imports all their oil; they don't make it. So and the pollution problems are incredible, but they have these hurricanes that come through every so often to clean the air. I've been there and seen it rain so hard you cannot see across the street. That's how hard it comes down. So
Monsoon.
a week later, he calls the president back and says, "Hey, what's the story?" Because the guy was going, "This is great. You're going to transform our nation." And he said, "Well, I'm sorry to say we can't do this." And he goes, "Why not?" He says, "Because all the tax revenue that runs the government comes from petrol sales." And it's like, so tax the motors? People will pay that small percentage of tax rather than fuel, and you'll save the economy and stimulate the economy. You'll become more competitive with every.
Or they could do a mileage tax or something like
And we would save our lungs and our bodies.
And the pollution, I can tell you, in the Philippines when it's not raining, is really nasty. I mean, not as bad as Beijing, but Beijing, you can look up at the sun anytime during the day because the smog is so thick. So directly, no sunglasses needed.
Pittsburgh used to be there.
All the industrialized countries that have gone through the progression of burning stuff. So you don't need fuel, and there are people that have done this. There's even a high-tech guy back in the 70s named Stan Myers went down. He said to his last $5 in his pocket working on his invention, and he was a devout Christian and didn't know that it was going to work until he actually saw it run and got confirmation of his faith. But he was also, being a technologist, was able to patent his devices. And so he patented a fuel injector because he realized that the best thing for the economy was to develop something that would fit in the working engines.
Right.
So he said, swap out your current fuel injectors, which he said are actually a sham. They don't inject efficiently. They do nothing more than waste gasoline, which is another thing that you have to look at the motivation. I mean, what would any industry do if their revenues dropped by 20%? They panic. So 20% improvement in fuel efficiency is not something they will ever want to happen, and will fight any legislation that drives them in that as long as they can. So that's the current path we're on. But he came up with this fuel injector that actually turned water into fuel right in the injector. And several of his patents leading up to that invention, he lectured on them, and I have copies of the videos of him talking about how he discovered that with a certain pulse frequency of BC power. Now, most people who do this don't know what they're doing, right? They don't understand the chemistry or the physics of it because the education they got is inadequate, quite frankly. But I'm gonna give you an insight into that later. He realized that he could exponentially increase the amount of gas which used as fuel by changing the frequency of how he energized the water. Okay, thinking he was making hydrogen and oxygen, right? Splitting water into something that will burn back. Now, even in Wikipedia, they will tell you, scientists will insist that it's impossible to get more energy out of burning water, or even using it in fuel cells, which turns it directly into electricity when you do it that way, than it takes to make the gas. So it's impractical and impossible to have an engine actually make the gas and then use it for fuel, because there's not enough energy to do that. Of course, they base that on work that was done in the 1700s with platinum rods and distilled water, inches apart in a beaker, and measuring the power it took to do that separation. Okay, and then burned it and measured the power you got out of burning hydrogen and oxygen. So these guys all, and Stan Myers is dead. He was killed after he signed a dinner or celebrated a production agreement with some foreign investors, and died at the celebration dinner.
Really?
And his final words were, "Oh, they poisoned me," and then he dropped dead.
Wow, yeah, this is movie stuff.
His brother actually is an electrical engineer, and his widow both have the patents, but literally I've heard they're afraid for their lives to actually go public and promote it as something to put in production automobiles.
Yeah.
So the fuel injector remains unbuilt, actually, not ever manufactured beyond the prototypes. But Stan used stainless steel, not platinum. He separated them by about 8 millimeters, the width of a tie wrap, a wire wrap.
Separated what?
Change the geometries and then change the electronics that do pulse DC as opposed to, pulse DC. Pulse DC is, DC is just a constant charge, right? Yeah. In one direction. AC reverses the direction.
Right.
So pulse DC is changing it but keeping it in that same direction. Okay? So by pulsing it, it seems that the molecules actually resonate and take that energy in more effectively in pulse widths, small pulse widths. And so he generated tons of gas. It just bubbled over and you could put tap water in. You didn't need to add any kind of, most people also in electrolysis to improve the efficiency, which goes astronomical, add something like potassium hydroxide to put a lot of ions in.
So the amount of DC power is very low compared to the amount of power that's
Absolutely.
in water. Right?
And the area, because another technical thing, electrical power consists of two main components. One is current, one is voltage. If it goes serially, the current will pass through everything in that line. If you go parallel, the voltage will pass through everything in parallel. So you can gain some efficiencies if you put all your plates together in the same line because the same current goes through there. The voltage has to increase with every plate, but that's only half your power. So to say that 2 rods here can only make, this happen by multiplying the total power is inadequate and completely misleading because only half the power has to increase to generate more gas. And you can in fact easily generate enough current with an alternator and voltage to run hundreds of plates. And another guy named Denny Klein in Florida used to race cars run on water. So there's no problem getting performance out of these systems, okay? But the real secret is that the physics of converting that water is not what people expect. It's not about splitting it into hydrogen and oxygen. It's simply about increasing the energy the water holds. And the reason why this is a secret is you've been completely misled about the physics of water. And so let's see a show of hands. Some of you have probably had a little basic chemistry. Everybody, I'm sure, has seen a water molecule, right? Big oxygen atom, 2 tiny protons.
H2O.
H2O. In a sort of a V, right? And they say, well, you've got these 2 little positive charges and a big negative mass around the oxygen, and so it aligns like it's a polar molecule, and that forms hydrogen bonding, this clumping together of water, right? All that's bullshit. The hydrogen protons are actually 34.6% bigger than the oxygen atom. Now that atom has 8 protons and 8 neutrons in it. Now, physical science, matter-based science can't explain it. So they ignore it, they downplay it. They talk about, well, there's a covalent radius, how big it is when it connects to things, and they like to use that because the oxygen's bigger. It's got more massive charge, essentially, but charge is a misnomer too. There's no such thing as charge. Because if there were hydrogen bonding, think about this, the more negative, the more energy that had in the negative side, the closer it would get together, right? The more clumping you would have, right? It has to. The negative is attracted to the positive, so of course it's going to draw more together, right? Wrong. They've demonstrated, and in fact, a friend of mine bought a water energizer that actually just puts electricity into water and energizes it. And guess how you can tell it energizes it? It reduces the hydrogen bonding. Go ahead.
Well, wasn't there a man that wrote a book a few years ago about the water molecule and the healing hand kind of things and putting the energy into it.
Dr. Emoto.
Yeah.